Good morning and welcome to this Saturday edition of Morning Joe Weekend. Let's get right to some of the conversations you might have missed.
For the first time in American history, a completely partisan rescissions bill was passed by Congress. Just hours after the Senate, the House voted to approve President Trump's $9 billion spending cut package. The bill claws back billions in previously approved congressional funding. 2 Republicans joined all Democrats in voting against it. The majority of the cuts, $8 billion, comes from foreign assistance programs like migration and refugee assistance and USAID. Another $1.1 billion is being cut from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That includes news outlets like NPR and PBS. The bill does not touch the funding for PEPFAR, the successful global program to combat HIV/AIDS credited with saving tens of millions of lives over the years. Meanwhile, the White House budget chief, Russell Vought, is now signaling more cuts could be on the way. He told reporters yesterday the president likely will send another rescission package request to Congress very soon, Joe.
Yeah, Caddy K, I've got to say, you look at the numbers, the $9 billion, and you stack it up with how much money was spent in that massive bill, biggest bill ever passed a couple of weeks ago. And I agree with what Admiral McRaven wrote a couple of days ago. We are giving our enemies, our people who consider America to be their enemies, just an incredible opening. So much of the foreign assistance programs did 2 things. They helped, of course, alleviate suffering for the poorest people in the world. But they also built goodwill from the United States. And yes, we even gained valuable intel in that process, especially in places like Africa, where we would learn what the Chinese were trying to do to make advances there, what the Russians were trying to do. And now, just for some ideological reason that makes no sense in the world to me, we're cutting off. We're cutting this money off. It's like cutting off R&D at the best universities on the planet. R&D that's helped fuel America's economic success. We just seem to be eating, as they say, eating our seed corn here.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most surprising things, Joe, about the second Trump administration is how quickly it's giving away America's soft power around the world. I've spent years reporting and living in Africa. America was the only game in town. When I was living in Senegal a couple of years ago, I already saw the influence of the Chinese. You drive around Senegal and it would be, this broadcast station brought to you by Chinese media, this clinic brought to you by the Chinese government. They were moving in already. What the Trump administration has done is opened the door wide to Chinese influence. And I think in the long run, I don't see, for the amount of money that it was costing, the little amount of money in proportion to America's budget problems that it was costing America, I just don't see what the benefit of this is to the United States. Its competitiveness, its influence in countries, its ability to gather intelligence, its ability to persuade countries to be allied to the United States. It was so easy for America to do this. I mean, this was a real easy, cheap win for the United States. And it's something that it is giving away to China. And China is stepping in to replace America in a way that, if we're looking at a global balance of power, well, which way does it shift it? It shifts it in China's direction.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Stein, this was the equivalent of like a 2-foot putt. Of course, that would be very difficult for me, but for most everybody else, boop, get the two. Now, this was easy. This soft power, this was easy. It didn't break the bank. In fact, you look at all the spending in this biggest bill ever passed, and this was just a fraction of it. And for a country that had been as concerned as we had been about the communist Chinese expanding into Africa, their influence and expanding in other parts of the world, the Belt and Road Initiative, and people trying to figure out how do we counteract that. This is the United States of America unilaterally disarming in the area of soft power, which is extremely important and has served us very well since 1945.
Yeah, I should probably start off with a disclosure. My wife works for one of these organizations that will be hit by the rescissions package. It's UNICEF. They're going to get cut about $137 million. It's a shocking cut to make because we're about to spend, by some proposals, $1 billion to $2 billion to restore Alcatraz for a detention center for migrants. I mean, the spending priorities are a little bit out of whack here. But to your point, this doesn't make much geopolitical sense to the United States. Look, it could be about soft power, and that's very legitimate. Obviously, Russia, China will swoop in and take over and ingratiate themselves to those populaces. But it's also about our own strategic interests, right? When we cut U.S. aid, when we cut State Department funding for controlling of diseases and famine, those problems don't just stay confined within their borders, right? I mean, we saw this with Ebola in 2014. When you do not have monitoring of Ebola, when you don't have the institutions and the programs in place to make sure that it doesn't spread, it will come to our borders and then will cost us. But then the other thing, and this I'm going to bring Dave in here, is the politics of this, which is we are about to go to a government funding deadline in September, right? And the White House now is saying, whatever you pass, Dave, whatever you pass, we have the ability to essentially take it back. And as long as we have a compliant Republican Congress, which they have for now, we will be able to, produce another rescission package and undo any deal that you come to in September. And if I'm a Democrat and I'm looking at that, I have to wonder, what is the point of signing off on a government funding deal that can be undone by a simple partisan vote? And they need 60 to get the government funding deal done, but what is the incentive for a Democrat to play ball here?
Oh, there's a significant moral hazard that you just described. The analysis of Democrats here by Republicans universally is they're going to be facing elections in Virginia and New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill's a member of Congress. Are they going to want to be part of a media churn news cycle? And the reality of what happens during a government shutdown if they don't fund the government. They've seen Chuck Schumer break and not want to be responsible for a shutdown. They assume that'll happen again. But you're right. What is the long-term effect? Going out years from now and Democrats are talking about their next presidency, their next trifecta, what does this mean for the filibuster in the future? Because this is another example of ways that the reasons for these giant thresholds are being broken down. If Republicans can, with 51 votes, undo spending, what is the disincentive for Democrats, if they ever get power again, to break the filibuster and to pass more spending? That's already happened with some of the California electric car mandate vote. So that's down the line, right. But you're right. The first effect of this is going to be much more cynicism by Democrats, and even if they cave, much more anger by their base.
Morning Joe Weekend. We'll be right back.
This is the way business has always been done.
What's the deal with this PAX 8 marketplace anyway? Seems unnecessary.
We'll wait to see where the markets go. The bottom line is our bottom line.
Why do I need AI when I have AOL?
Visit pax8.com to learn more.
For Apex Evolution, we kind of went back to the drawing board and looked at what type of material do we need to put into an application like this where performance is going to be key. What we landed on was a 90% nylon, 10% elastane blend that gives the board short stretch. It's a super lightweight fabric, so it really feels great when you're wearing it. For most consumers, you would never know that it was made from recycled fishing nets.
What's going on here?
Have you seen their detection times and their MTTR is to die for?
Amy, hey, I know your team's doing some amazing work with Splunk, but I think it's going to their heads.
And your problem with boosting digital resilience and making sure our systems are safe and reliable is what exactly?
Touché.
The Southern California RV Super Show is coming to you. Join us at any Camping World in Southern California, July 18th to the 20th, to shop ridiculous discounts on the best selection of RVs in Southern California. Get all the details at campingworld.com/Southern California RV Super Show.
Okay, for game night?
Royal Kingdom is a brand new puzzle game that just launched, so we don't need these.
Wait, what? Those are my games.
You can build kingdoms by solving puzzles. Here.
Oh, wow, that is fun. You're right. We don't need these games.
Don't even need Wi-Fi.
See you later, router.
And best of all, no ads.
No ads.
You got back it up.
Was that an overreaction? Download Royal Kingdom today.
Maybe.
Here at Mint, we love green, and I'm excited to tell you about a deal that will save you a lot of green. We're teaming up with Samsung to give you unlimited premium wireless and the new Galaxy S25 with Galaxy AI for $30 a month. Your friends will be green with envy, and those little green bubbles, not an issue anymore. So you can like the messages and do a proper group chat with any phone. Video that doesn't look like it was filmed on a brick. Turns out it actually is easy being green. The frog is a liar.
Your ED could be in your head, but for too long, outdated ED meds have been obsessed with your plumbing, giving no thought to the spark that starts in your brain way before anything even twitches. That's why we made Rougiette Ready, the first ED med that works on both brain and body, with sildenafil and tadalafil to help optimize your body's natural response, and apomorphine to complement that reaction in your brain. So don't just get a reaction, get ready.
1 second, they're a neighbor you like. The next, they're a neighbor you trust.
Actually, no problem.
1 second, you're worrying about your home. And then, thanks to ADT, there's a lot less to worry about. Feel secure enough to let others in with Trusted Neighbor from ADT.
That's the vibrancy of our democracy.
We know what happens when Donald Trump turns his ire onto someone.
America first becomes America alone becomes America last.
The Weeknight, Monday through Friday at 7 on MSNBC.
The idea was floated from someone in the media to the president. The president would not recommend a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. That's how he feels.
There's been a lot of discussion about the Epstein files and the president's comments yesterday calling it a hoax. Can you clarify which part of the Epstein hoax is the hoax part?
The president is referring to the fact that Democrats have now seized on this as if they ever wanted transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, which is an asinine suggestion for any Democrat to make. The Democrats had control of this building, the White House, for 4 years, and they didn't do a dang thing when it came to transparency in regards to Jeffrey Epstein.
Again, spinning wildly, trying to blame Democrats for Jeffrey Epstein. Those comments come despite some of the president's most prominent supporters backing the idea of appointing a special counsel, including Steve Bannon, Laura Loomer, and Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado. President Trump's former vice president, Mike Pence, spoke out in an interview this week, pushing for the release of the Epstein files.
I think the time has come for the administration to release all of the files regarding Jeffrey Epstein's investigation and prosecution. I think that anyone who participated or was associated with this despicable man ought to be held up to public scrutiny. I just think we ought to get the facts to the American people. I mean, I've always believed in transparency. I know of no reason why this administration, once the victims' names are protected, should not release all the files on Jeffrey Epstein.
Elon Musk also weighing in, flooding his social media site X with criticism of the president, and far-right media personality, longtime Trump supporter Nick Fuentes called the president's handling of the case a scam. Meanwhile, President Trump says he will sue the Wall Street Journal over its latest reporting on a letter Trump allegedly sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003. According to the Journal, the letter was part of a larger gift Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, was preparing, an album of dozens of letters from Epstein's friends and associates on his 50th birthday. People who have reviewed the notes tell the Journal the pages are among the documents the Justice Department reviewed when it investigated Epstein and Maxwell years ago. It's unclear whether these documents are part of the Trump administration's recent review. The Journal reports it reviewed the letter bearing Trump's name, describing it as bawdy. The paper writes the letter quote, contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. The letter concludes, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." NBC News has not independently verified that document. In an interview with the Journal, the president denied writing the letter, saying, quote, "This is not me. This is a fake thing. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women. It's not my language. It's not my words." The Journal reports the president then threatened to sue the paper if it published the piece. The Justice Department has not responded to the Journal's request for comment. The FBI also declining comment. After the story was indeed published, President Trump slammed the piece again in a Truth Social post, writing, "It is false, malicious, and defamatory." He went on to write he will be suing the Journal, its parent company News Corp, and its owner, Rupert Murdoch. Joe.
So, Dave Weigel, there had been talk of this story coming for quite some time. And yesterday afternoon, when it started to be reported that the White House and the president was pressuring the Wall Street Journal and Emma Tucker not to publish a story, at that point, you looked at it. I'm sure your reaction was the same as mine, which was, well, now the Wall Street Journal's going to publish this story because they can't be seen backing down to President Trump just because he's applying the pressure. But it is fascinating, isn't it, that we've seen the lawsuits against everybody from ABC News, CBS News, even Ann Seltzer because of a poll that went terribly wrong. But now the possibility of Rupert Murdoch. The president says he's going to sue Rupert Murdoch and News Corp.
I do want to separate Ann Seltzer because of the people you mentioned. She's the one who didn't settle. She just won, and they withdrew the lawsuit. When it comes to Murdoch and the other suite of media companies he owns Fox News, too. I've seen Republicans, Randy Fine from Florida, say that he's having his office cancel their free Wall Street Journal subscription. What are they going to do about Fox News? Is Fox News going to get the same treatment? Because you saw last night, finally, some unity from Republicans this week. They are very comfortable in the skin of blaming the media for lying about Donald Trump, and they're very comfortable blaming Democrats for, as some of them were even saying, colluding. Word didn't really apply here, by pointing out the story, making fun of the story. Democrats have been surprisingly unified on this. I say surprisingly because I was talking to Jamie Harrison, the former DNC chair, this week, and asked him, did the DNC ever think about running Epstein ads or making hay of this in 2024? And they never did. So this has become more partisan because of the release of the story. But I'm not trying to use the passive voice here. It's Republicans who decided this is a much more familiar fight for them to have. Blame the media. It's just a little inconvenient that they're blaming the Wall Street Journal, which has not the editorial page that goes after Trump on trade, but generally credibility with Republicans. Fox News, which is hiring conservative podcasts that are very pro-Trump. Are they going to declare total war against Fox News for lying about the president? I don't know where that stage of this goes. The first stage of it, of them saying it's all fake, that's very familiar for Republicans to just say the media is lying about Donald Trump.
Yeah, let me just note, in his statement, Trump said he doesn't do drawings. In fact, he does drawings. There's a bunch of doodles that he's produced of New York City landscapes. I don't know if there's a naked women one in public yet. I agree with you that this is a familiar foe for Republicans, and that they seem a lot more comfortable going after the fake news, and in this case, the Wall Street Journal, even J.D. Vance jumping in there. But I do wonder if this calms the waters, really. Like, yes, it's nice to have an adversary, and certainly this has all the familiarities of every other scandal that Trump has walked through, even the Access Hollywood tape. But at the same time, when he's out there saying, I want Pam Bondi to release the grand jury testimonies, that's a portion of the evidence that is out there around the Epstein trial. And already you're seeing some blowback saying, well, wait a second, that's not going to cut it. Like, we want to see the actual evidence, the files, all the stuff that went into the grand jury discovery. Do you think that this is going to pacify Republicans in the long term? Yes, maybe in the short term, but in the long term?
I see news cycles having a certain shelf life, and where I see this ending, frankly, is the country moving on because something else happens, and this boils in the background, but Republicans are no longer getting asked every day about Epstein.
Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee now are pushing for a public hearing on the Epstein files, urging their Republicans to call top Justice Department officials to testify about their handling of the investigation. Let's bring in the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Hey, Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. So this is fascinating, to say the least. You have 83% of Donald Trump supporters saying they want the Epstein files released. You have the president calling it a Democratic hoax. We've had Tom Winter on this week, Ken Delaney, who's going to be on in a few minutes, just had David Rohde on this morning, who said, well, the president's actually correct. From all of our reporting, there's no magic list out there. There's no Epstein list. And there's not a lot of things that can be released that would be damaging to this rich and powerful group of men. I'm curious, and there's the poll number, 83% among Trump voters want it released. What is the Democratic response to this? What should the Democratic response to this be, given what the news reports are on what's in the files and what's not in the files, but also what Trump voters are demanding?
Well, it's not just Trump voters. I mean, the vast majority of the American public says release the files, and that's all we're saying. There's a huge file on this case. There are photographs in this case. There have been several law enforcement investigations that are completed. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. One of his other associates is dead. Maxwell's in prison for 20 years. So the criminal investigative process is essentially over unless there are new people who surface, in the prior investigations. But just release the files. That's all really the whole American public is saying. And, when the question is asked, well, where did people get the idea that there's a huge list of power elite actors who participated in the child sex ring that Epstein was running? They got it from Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the one promoting that idea, and J.D. Vance and Attorney General Bondi. So at this point, they've got to come clean with the public. That's not a difficult ask. And everybody is wondering, why suddenly has Donald Trump performed this 180-degree U-turn on the whole thing, and he wants to just sweep it under the rug and say there's nothing to see here. So he's causing a lot more problems for himself as he delays the inevitable release of the file. And by the way, we don't want a release of the information that Pam Bondi deems credible. We want the entire file. We don't trust Bondi to say what's credible and what's not. We can be the judge of that ourselves.
So a lot of questions here. This has been a bizarre story for 20 years. I mean, the original plea deal that Acosta did in the Southern District of Florida, letting the state set up a deal where he walks in and out of prison. He works out of his office in Palm Beach. You have that part of the story. You have part of the story where, and we talked about it in 17, 18, 19, like we kept asking, why is this guy walking free? At the same time, Julie Brown was writing her extraordinary stories for the Miami Herald. But so many questions, but obviously one question, you're saying release the files now. Why didn't the Biden administration, why didn't Merrick Garland release the files from 21 to 25? And if they didn't release the files then, why should they be released now?
So first, on your point about Acosta, you're absolutely right. This was Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor, who was then the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. DOJ had prepared a 60-count federal indictment against Epstein for running this child sex ring with human trafficking charges and prostitution and conspiracy and so on. All of that got transposed into one count of solicitation at the state level. They covered the whole thing up, and they brokered that deal without the involvement of any of the victims or their families. So Democrats have been demanding hearings on that. We were demanding hearings on that and full disclosure on that many years ago. And we were blowing the whistle on Acosta, and he was forced to resign. So, this thing has had the stench of corruption for a long time. Why is it such a big deal now?
So did you
Donald
get
Trump
any evidence
ran...
on that, Congressman? Let me ask you about Acosta. I know he had to resign. Did you get any evidence on why did you figure out why this sweetheart deal was given? Any evidence on sex tapes then, or client lists, or any of the other things that 20 years later we're all asking for? Because it seems to me that was the original sin, so to speak, that sweetheart deal. And I fear 19 years later, any evidence that was available then is probably destroyed by now. What did you learn from your investigation of Acosta and this original sweetheart deal in 2006?
Well, we never had a full-blown investigation, which is what, we were demanding. Acosta did end up resigning when all of these issues were raised. Obviously, there was all kinds of influence used in order to suppress a real prosecution and a thoroughgoing investigation, and they closed out the victims and their victims' families. So Epstein was able to use all of his powerful connections, including who was then his best friend, Donald Trump, in order to suppress a real hearing into what had happened. And look, why is this important? Because the sexual abuse of young people and children is a crisis throughout our society. There's, of course, the church scandal, or many church scandals. There's what happened at Michigan State. There's what happened at Ohio State.
But Congressman, you could have gotten that from 21 to 25 when Democrats controlled the DOJ. Why? It was a crisis then. It's a crisis now. Why didn't Democrats call for it from 21 to 25?
So, I mean, you'd have to go back and look specifically at particular prosecutorial decisions and what was taking place in terms of the other cases. So I don't know. We could try to reconstruct that record. But the point is that Donald Trump is the one who has led the crusade to say that that Epstein, who was his very close friend, and there's all kinds of pictures of them and so on, that Epstein was at the center of this broad conspiracy. He's now in a position to do exactly what he demanded, which was to release all of the files.
Federal prosecutor Maureen Comey, the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, was fired by the Justice Department. It's unclear why she was let go, but sources familiar with the matter tell NBC News the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York cited Article 2 of the Constitution, which establishes the executive power of the president. Comey prosecuted Sean Diddy Combs during his sex trafficking trial this year and played a role in the prosecution of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and of his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. Recently, Comey had become the target of renewed attacks by influencers in Trump's right-wing base who are raising concerns over the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein case. This also comes as the DOJ has launched a criminal investigation into Maureen's father, James Comey. Joining us now with new reporting on this development is New York Times investigative reporter Michael Schmidt. Michael, there's a lot to work with there. What happened, as far as you can tell?
Oh, we don't really know what happened. We know that Maureen Comey had been one of the lead prosecutors on the Puffy Combs case, that result had happened about a couple of weeks ago. Last week, two things about her father came out. One, that the Justice Department may be looking at him again related to the Russia investigation. That is something that he's been investigated as nauseam about, including by a special counsel under Trump's first term. We also learned last week, we reported that in the day after Comey had posted a photo on Instagram that the Secret Service had investigated as a potential threat to the president, Comey himself and his wife were followed by the Secret Service, both through physical surveillance as they drove home from vacation, but also they tracked his phone. And here here you have her being fired amid this huge firestorm that has engulfed the Trump administration about the Epstein case. As Tom Winter has pointed out, there is no client list, but whatever there is in the Epstein files, Maureen Comey knows. She brought the prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein in 2019 during the first Trump term, and it was just a month after that Epstein hung himself in his cell room, and she was one of the lead prosecutors on that case.
Yeah, Michael, on that point, so the timing of this, I think, is what caught a lot of people by attention. Of course, there's a connection to her father, and she prosecuted other cases, but as the president is caught up in this firestorm around Jeffrey Epstein, conveniently, one of the prosecutors who went after him is fired. She had been arguing against the disclosure of any more information because there's sensitive information, obviously, about young victims. She had all the reasons that prosecutors have valid. What is your sense of any connection between her firing and what's happening right now between the White House, all of his supporters, and Jeffrey Epstein?
We don't know. Look, this is something that far-right agitators had been pushing for some time to get rid of her. They had identified her as Comey's daughter, and loyalty is obviously something incredibly important to the MAGA movement and to Trump. And the Trump administration in its second term has used its power both externally and internally in highly unusual and in extraordinary ways. There are a slew of prosecutors that have been fired by the department, many of them who worked on January 6th investigations. That's something we've never seen before, where the department just comes in and clears out prosecutors who worked on controversial cases, or at least controversial cases to the President of the United States.
Sometimes the only way to recover a stolen masterpiece is to steal it back. Author Daniel Silva's new fictional novel titled An Inside Job follows the latest adventure of art restorer and intelligence officer Gabriel Lalonde, who's been awarded a commission to restore one of the most important paintings in Venice. But when Lalonde discovers the body of a mysterious woman floating in the waters of the Venetian lagoon, he finds himself in a desperate race to recover a lost masterpiece by Leonardo da Vinci. An Inside Job is the 25th book in Daniel Silva's wildly successful series featuring the main character, and the New York Times bestselling author Daniel Silva joins us now. Daniel, it seems as we hit number 25, it's a good time to just stop for a second and look back and just say, what is it about this series that has captured the imagination of so many people across the world?
I think it starts with the character. I stumbled upon a great character when I created Gabriel Lalonde. I think the most interesting thing about Gabriel is that he was never supposed to be a continuing character. He was supposed to appear in one book and one book only. And I had to be talked into writing a second book. I really didn't think it was a good idea. Really smart guy. But my publisher talked me into it, and I wrote a second book featuring Gabriel. It did better than the first book. I had to be talked into writing the third book, and when I did that, I realized I had a winning formula on my hands. But I think it's the unique skill set that he has. I mean, he is, arguably the greatest art restorer of Italian old master paintings in the world. And he also happens to be a legendary secret operative, retired at this point. So he's just got that unique set of skills. I can plug him into any kind of story that I want. In this case, he helps the Italian police identify this woman that you referenced in your introduction by creating a forensic sketch of her. The body, without getting too gross at breakfast time, has been in the Grand Canal for a while, and it's decomposed. And Gabriel recreates this woman's face and realizes that he had encountered her a few days earlier. So he's got this incredible set of skills. He's charming, he's wonderful, he's erudite, and he has lots of very, very interesting friends, including the Supreme Pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church.
just like the author here. So tell us, before you started writing these novels, you were actually a reporter. This isn't something that you had planned to do your entire life, but you sort of did some reporting in putting this book together, and that is digging deep on Da Vinci. What did you find out about him that you didn't know before?
What I found out about him is that this book is based on I really studied the way he went about making his paintings, because Gabriel has to, in effect, create a fake Da Vinci in this painting as part of the plot. So I had to learn how he actually put a painting together from the piece of wood on up, layer by layer by layer. And I studied and figured out how he did it. You will read exactly how he assembled his painting, how he used ground glass under the paintings to reflect light, little tricks like that. So I had to actually try to teach myself how to paint like Leonardo da Vinci. That was the most challenging thing.
Oh, wow. Easy task there.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy task there. So, Daniel, I mean, these books are a yearly highlight. They come out mostly in the summer. Yeah. You sort of said it. Your character is flexible enough and charismatic enough that you can insert him in a bunch of different categories. My question to you is, it's sort of a plea. Don't run out of ideas. How do you keep creating, as the character has aged, like his life has changed, how do you make sure you don't write yourself into a corner? How do you make sure you always have some fresh adventure ahead?
For me, the hardest thing is deciding which one to write next. I've got a stack of ideas that I carry around with me, and it's when I'm finishing a novel, if everything's firing on all cylinders, the next book will rise to the surface for me. And so as I'm finishing this novel, I'm sort of working on the next one with subconscious. I have no shortage of ideas on how to keep the series going. Like anyone who has written a long-running series, do you consider writing other things? Sure. Do my publishers want me to write other books? No, not really. Am I very, very happy writing Gabriel on? You bet. He is a joy to spend time with. And we've seen a softer side of him in this final stretch run of his life. This is where I always planned to, once I settled on the series, I always wanted to land him in Venice, to have him come out in the open and get his due as an art restorer.
Okay, Daniel, I wish you could remind me to take my summer vacation after the book comes out. I've already taken it in June, and I need to wait until your book comes out so that I can read it while I'm on holiday. I think I just have to take another vacation. Last summer was the first time that Gabriel was retired, and so kind of cut loose a bit from Mossad and the Israeli intelligence services, but also from his friends. Can you reassure us that we're going to see his friends again from Israel? Because I kind of miss them. I want them back. I've been asked many times in the last couple of years, are you going to write about what's happening right now? And I chose not to for a couple of reasons. One is that the story was unfolding so rapidly, and I could not imagine that. I'm pretty good at predicting events. I never could have predicted that the United States would attack Iran's nuclear program, for example. So I didn't want to get in a situation where events overtook what was going on in the book. That's sort of the cardinal sin of thriller writing. But it's also just been, a very ugly, awful period of history, and it's not something that I'm terribly interested in writing about right now.